To give a brief overview, City on Fire is one of Apple TV Plus's newest shows, which continue to show why, while Apple TV Plus has Ted Lasso, The Morning Show, and a few other things that have critical acclaim, for the most part, I would say most people do not know what Apple TV has, and it's because the quality is usually something of the likes of City on Fire. So to give you an idea of what the storylines are, there's pretty much two notable ones. One is the life and potential death of Sam Young, who was a young woman, NYU freshman class student, who was heavily in the indie music scene. She catches the eye of a particular group called Ex Post Facto, who's one of her favorite groups, and she attaches to them. Even when they dissolve, she's very much attached to them, and that leads her to becoming very close to Nikki Chaos, who's the new lead, a gentleman named DT, Soul, and also a girl named, well, her name is Lorraine, but they nicknamed her Sewer Girl because in Nikki's eyes, she doesn't think big enough or think complicated enough because she's into astrology and cute animals. It's dumb, but these people pretty much become Sam's closest friends. But that is until some situations happen, which Nikki is part of, and Sam meets, or rather is reintroduced to, a young man named Charlie from her hometown. He's about 1 year her junior, and she pretty much adopts him in the way that extroverts adopt introverts, and she opens up his world, and in return, he gives her the kind of stability and normalcy which allows her to know that she doesn't always have to be the most interesting, or, offer something beyond her person. And I don't even mean that like in a physical way, but just like her presence. But as much as Sam grows close to Charlie, it's hard to say what it is that she is to anybody. She might have had something with this Nikki Chaos. She might have had feelings for Charlie, but she's also someone's mistress in a marriage. And with all these different people involved, including Lorraine potentially being jealous of Sam, it leads to the question of, when Sam gets shot, who could have done it? Was it Nikki out of spite? Was it Lorraine out of jealousy? Charlie didn't shoot her, we know that much. But because Sam was slowly but surely starting to get into Nikki's business, which involves this man named Amory, who we're about to get into next, there's so many people who could have been factors in her attempted murder that it becomes the mystery of the season. Which leads to the second main storyline, which is the rise of Amory Gold. Amory, who's also called the Demon Brother, is a major power broker in New York, especially with the backing of the Hamilton Sweeney Group, which mostly focuses on real estate development. He's someone who notably came from nothing, was an orphan, and adopted by the Hamilton Sweeney Group's, let me back up. Bill Sr. made the Hamilton Sweeney Group. Amory is his brother-in-law through his now dead wife. And Amory, through the use of blackmail and extortion, rose up in the ranks in society, and also was able to use all the leverage he had in order to help the company in order to become bigger than perhaps what Bill Sr. could have potentially done on his own. But the problem with Amory is he doesn't just keep files on potential enemies or people who can become investors, he also kept them on the family. And some could even say that he orchestrated situations which could have been used in order to blackmail family members like Regan. But it isn't just the blackmailing and maybe even setting up Regan. He's also the financier for Nikki's whole operation, which concludes a lot of acts of arson and setting things on fire, even to the point of potentially getting a bomb. And that becomes part of the reason why Amory is the second main storyline, because in one factor you can look at it as he is a potential person who, because Sam might have found out about everything, he might have been the one who ordered her death or even killed her himself. But at the same time, when it comes to Regan, Bill Sr. and Bill Sr.'s son William, who's a hot ass mess, so comes the question of how can they handle Amory, who is slowly but surely splitting the family apart, taking over the family business, and really becoming the Demon Brother, well, really earning the Demon Brother nickname beyond just him being sassy, petty, shady, and a bit of an ass. So before we get into the review, I would say when it comes to City on Fire, this is for those who are willing to stick around while the show goes from being heavily reliant on one or a few characters to eventually creating reasons to get invested in multiple, or if not the majority of characters. This is not one of those shows that's just instantly good. It takes time, and honestly, almost you have to pretty much watch until like halfway through the show before you really are like, okay, I'm being rewarded for my patience. With that said, let's get into the notable performances, moments, or episodes. And notable performance number 1 is Choi Soo-won as Sam, who is the initial hook when it comes to City on Fire. She plays this vibrant, extroverted character who boys like Charlie, in no matter what show or movie you talk about, are privileged to encounter. And despite the amount of screen time she has, since she gets shot within the first episode or two, and then from there she's mostly seen in flashbacks or else in a coma in a hospital bed, she still leaves her presence. She still leaves this effect on you that it makes it so the drive of watching the show to the end, if nothing else, is just hoping that she comes out of the coma, just because of how much she's built up through flashbacks with Charlie. The next notable performance for us is James Cameron Mitchell as Amory Gold, and that's because he's someone you just love to hate, and the way Mitchell plays him creates the kind of villain the show needed in order to bring some kind of interest to William, Regan, and that whole Hamilton Sweeney family drama. Because when I tell you that they felt like such a liability within the first 4 or so episodes, especially Regan, I swear to you, if it wasn't for Amory going back and forth with them, and you knowing that he needs some type of comeuppance and they're the only ones who can deliver it, that is the sole thing that gave him any type of, what's the best way to put it, relevancy. Setting aside performances and talking about notable episodes, episode 2 to me was really notable because that's when Sam really gets to you, as she and Charlie have a quiet moment on New Year's Eve, and it allows you to understand that as much as there's often this portrayal of this kind of basic run-of-the-mill guy with this girl who seems so interesting and led to that whole trope of the manic pixie dream girl, I feel like with episode 2 it really allows you to see that Sam doesn't qualify for that. Yes, she is a life-altering presence in Charlie's life, but at the same time it's not a one-way interaction. What Charlie gives her is peace amongst all the chaos that she has initiated, and sometimes even once in a way, and he allows her to just be. She can just be Sam, this girl who has very interest when it comes to the arts, especially in terms of making a magazine, doing photography, being an art student of some kind at NYU, and just having someone who's interested, appreciates it, and always has his eyes and ears open because he's paying attention, rather than waiting for his turn to talk. Following that, I would say episodes 5 and 6 really are a turning point for the show because it allows some of the pressure off of Amory and even Sam to be a lifeline of the show as Regan's story picks up, as William becomes not this burnt out drug addict wannabe artist, but as he gets involved in the Sam murder investigation and even investigating Amory in a way, it allows him to become an asset. As we learn what happened to Regan that led her to not back up her brother against Amory, she gets the kind of sympathy the show is so badly trying to give her when it comes to her being cheated on by Keith, but doesn't really click that well. But again, those 2 episodes allow the characters who don't offer much to finally get built up in a way that makes them less liabilities and more some form of an asset. As for regular highlights, I'm definitely going to say Lorraine, and it's because something about her just makes it feel like they could have done more with the character. She's this girl from the South who traveled a bit until she met Soul, who's this character we learn not a damn thing about, but seems way too... As much as people may say that a type like Charlie may not deserve a type like Sam. I would say, if anything, people like Soul don't deserve a type like Lorraine, who, yes, in the words of Nikki, might be a bit simple in some ways because she's into astrology a little bit too much, but there's something sweet about her in a way, and something innocent and vulnerable that we see little glimpses of. Like, for example, it becomes very clear that for Lorraine to feel like she can secure a friendship, especially if it's with a guy, that she needs to sleep with them or have sex with them. And you can see that through potentially her relationship with Soul, her relationship with Nikki, and it seemed like she wanted to push that on to Charlie as well as a means to secure what they have. But in him rejecting her, yet still valuing her as a person, it allows you to not only see Charlie in a good light, but also help you really feel for Lorraine, since as you take note that she doesn't have alternatives because she's very reliant on what Nikki and Soul can provide her, it makes you almost wish that something better could come along for her, that something, I don't know how to put it, it just makes you want something that allows her to break away from this group who clearly she's only with because financially and housing wise they're providing with her for so much that she can't provide for herself. Leading to the low point, and that's pretty much Solomon. Solomon is the type of character who you want to know more about. He has very aggressive tendencies, is able and willing to attempt murder, and he follows along Nikki almost like a crazed pit bull sometimes, but you never fully understand why. The why of Solomon is very much unclear, and it's frustrating because the more he does, the more you want to just get one flashback in an episode to allow you to, or maybe even a conversation to tell you that he came from here, he's messed up because of this, that, or that person, and that is why when it comes to Nikki's charisma, he's able to be sucked in by this wannabe cult leader. But that never happens. Soul never evolves beyond being Nikki's muscle and the person who Lorraine pretty much uses for some form of protection until, he decides he wants to bite back. For the first on the fence topic, it has to be Regan. And that's because Regan is the type of character who initially she was built as someone just to feel sympathy for, just because her husband was cheating on her, her family's company was in trouble because her father had her fall from grace, and she had to deal with her uncle who is very opportunistic, now being ahead of things and her potentially being at his mercy. However, thankfully by episode 5 or 6, which means you damn near have to wait until like half the whole season for her to become somebody you care about, things change for her. And the way that it changes for her is because Regan has this moment that allows you to understand that I don't want to say she's a victim of circumstances, but she's definitely someone who didn't have the opportunities to potentially fail or make a mistake. So when you factor in what happened between her and another person because of Amory, her reaction to that, and that leading to her securing a position within the family company as a means to keep her quiet, it's the first time when the show doesn't try to just throw something at her and make you feel bad for her because of something that happened, but it allows you to see her potentially able to make the best of a bad situation, and that allows some type of means of connecting to the character so that she's not just a victim but in some ways a survivor. And yes, it's terrible that she had to even go through something to get that title, but at the very least she's making some kind of fight, she's doing something which would allow her to, if not get a sense of power, at least get something out of the situation besides trauma. The next on the fence topic deals with Charlie, and that's because in some ways similar to Regan, Charlie is one of those characters who is pushed to be the son archetype and not much else is done with him. It's made clear that Charlie is adopted, it's made clear that Charlie's dad died in 9/11, and that he's this introverted kid who doesn't really have much in the way of friends or really anything going on in his life besides his mom who's overprotective and sometimes seeing a therapist. So with being introduced like that, there's not much reason to take note of him, and unfortunately he becomes very dependent on Sam early on. But like Regan, in time, as he starts to get built out by another character, you start to see his value. And granted, his value even toward the end remains very dependent on what he can do or be to other people rather than who he is as an individual. But at the very least, in time, he becomes somebody you care about. And perhaps to wrap this all up, or summarize the last 2 points, probably the main thing that's going to get on your nerves when it comes to watching the show is that it takes too long to get good. No show, especially an 8-episode show, should take until episode 5 or 6 when it should be wrapping things up to get good across the board. Because relying simply on Sam and then Amory being the big villain and Sam being the undeniably likable hero type, I don't think that can sustain a show as good as those two actors are. And this is especially true when it's not like this is a small cast. You have Sam, you have Charlie, then you have Nikki, DT, Nikki Chaos, then you also have Soul, then you have Bill Sr., then you have Regan, then you have William, then you have Amory, and then a bunch of characters that I don't even bring up, like Regan and Keith's kids, who play a factor, since there was a point when I thought Keith's son could possibly have shot Sam. And you have all these characters, but you're so reliant on just two for damn near half the show that it's, as much as I understand that there is a clear line between a leading character and supporting character, because this show feels a little bit like it wants to be an ensemble, it doesn't give enough for Sam, who mostly exists in flashbacks, to really pump up the show. And in terms of Amory, the show smartly makes him the kind of villain who's not in every other scene, but at the same time, because it's using him as such a crutch, it makes it so that not having him in more ways makes it harder to get through this, especially if you're not somebody with patience, never mind somebody who, since this is thankfully a show that came out week to week instead of as a binge watch, can deal with the fact that you have to wait a whole week to know what happens next. Because, not to go on a tangent, but that's sort of the issue that we've always had when it comes to binge watching versus week to week. Binge watching this show, I would have probably stopped at episode 3. Week to week, I can kind of clear my palate by watching other things, and then because I'm already this far, I can feel like, okay, maybe it'll be better this episode. Maybe it'll be better this episode. And of course, it took 5 episodes to get there, but at the very least, time in between allowed for a bit more grace. But point of the matter is, this is a show that requires patience to get good, similar to its network cousin Servant. As for what we hope to see in season 2, assuming this gets a season 2, I'm gonna need them to really continue to expand these side supporting characters and make it so, as much as it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with Sam and Amory going forward, I want them to make it so that if you're gonna hook onto these characters, make it so that everybody else doesn't feel like those cans and ribbons on the back of a wedding vehicle while the two other people are going off into the sunset. I need these other characters to be something of value, not something that just drag along just because we need people to take up time and space. So overall, when it comes to City on Fire, I still firmly feel like they should have made this a mini-series that was 10 episodes rather than something that's 8 episodes and then dragging it on to a second season. For it's good enough, but when you start adding all the layers to it of this being something you could only access through a paid prescription, never mind that this is something that doesn't have necessarily a diverse group of characters or storylines to really hook you, City on Fire is not something I would necessarily recommend, especially for people who want some type of justification to get an Apple TV Plus subscription. But it's one of those things where if you already have it and you've watched everything else on the network, never mind anything else you can watch on other subscriptions, cable, whatever, this is worth checking out.